Um, Sorry. Okay, comrades, I welcome everybody to this meeting. It's a great honor to us to have David Newton, a famous family name to all of us. The example that the Panthers showed in the particularly in the heyday in the late 60s was an inspiration to many militants and socialists around the world, and it's a great honor to have David with us today. I won't take any more time. I'll hand over to you, David. If you could open up for, how long would you like for your opening contribution? We usually say about 20 minutes to start, and then you can respond to questions and reply to the discussion at the end. Is that all right?
That's perfectly fine.
Okay, good. Well, over to you, David.
Hey, well, as we say here, and I picked up in South Africa, you say the same thing, all power to the people. And that movement, I believe, is spurred by the fight against apartheid. When you say Amandla, and everyone says in Watu, we needed to get our language or verbiage together a little bit more, because we all say all power to the people and everybody throw their fists up like this, but there's no reaction from the other side. So I like how you how they do it there. But yeah, so I know we're here to talk about the Black Panther Party and also the ILWU Local 10 or International Longshoremen Warehousing Union, and how they parallel. You probably have a fair amount of information on both, but I'll start with the Black Panther Party. So as you alluded to, the Black Panther Party of Self-Defense was created in 1966, and it was co-founded by then Huey P. Newton, who turned into Dr. Huey P. Newton, who we like to always say doctor, because he did have that. And here, the African-American is always belittled in some way, shape, or form. So these titles may not mean much to everyone, but they are important. So Dr. Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale co-founded the Black Panther Party, and the objective of the founding of the Black Panther Party was to balance the unequalization of the African American in the United States as a whole. And they started the party right here in Oakland, California, where I am now, which is if anyone doesn't know the area, there's only a bridge that divides us and San Francisco. So in 1943, my grandfather migrated to California in what we call the Great Western Migration. Most African Americans came through the South and or the East Coast via slave ships or slave chattel cargo, however you may say it. And when you have the Great Western Migration, you had railroads being built, you had warehouse industries kicking up for industrial purposes. This would be post World War II and I. So you had a lot of Black people moving to north in North America via New York, Chicago, Detroit. They had the auto industry there. And in the West, we had warehouses. And my grandfather was part of that you had drones of people. So they were originally out of Louisiana, and 7 children. My dad would be the second youngest, and Huey would be the youngest of that family. The other siblings actually grew up in Louisiana. My dad and Huey moved, and I believe Huey was 2, and my dad would have been 6 when they moved here. So they truly grew up in Oakland. But also part of that movement, you had Los Angeles and you had Oakland and other surrounding cities of what we call as the Bay Area, which would be San Francisco, Oakland, Richmond, San Jose. You had this influx of people moving to these areas. So the law enforcement, they asked for help in hiring new police people. So you had a lot of police people moving from the deep South west, along with these people moving for work. So with that, you had a police force that was really, really, really aggressive. They would beat people on a regular basis. They would unjustly arrest people and just harass Black people in the neighborhoods. So that had been going on for a long time. So simultaneously, you have the civil rights movement with SNCC, which would be Stokely Carmichael, if you know anything about him. Dr. Martin Luther King, of course, with the nonviolent civil rights movement. And you had the Nation of Islam movement with Malcolm X. So Malcolm X was murdered in 1965. And at that time, Huey and Bobby were both in college, and no one was satisfied with the treatment of Black people in the community. So they started casually talking about forming something that could right this unjust treatment of humans. And let me go backward a little bit. So my grandfather, my grandfather for us would be the strongest or toughest Newton that we knew, because he was the son of a sharecropping family, and his mother was raped by a Jewish man in Alabama. And at that time, she was married. She worked next door to the family's house. And he had that marriage had 2 children, and my grandmother was raped, and my great grandmother was raped. My grandfather was the product of that rape. So he always felt like he was not really accepted by who was actually the stepfather, which would be Mr. Newton. So for that reason, he moved out on his own at 12 years old and sharecropped on his own. And he met my grandmother. He was 18, she was 14. And they were married and lived the rest of their life together. So Huey is the product of that union. And 7 children. None of them were named after revolutionaries or activists, but Huey just so happened to be named after the governor of Louisiana, who was Huey P. Long. And the Black people of Louisiana loved Huey P. Long. He would do things for the community, like start paving streets, He put new books in schools for the children. So the Black people of Louisiana loved Huey P. Long. And Huey P. Long was assassinated inside the Capitol in Louisiana, if you don't know any of that history. Okay, so fast forward. Huey and Bobby, they start following the police around in the neighborhoods. And Huey was studying law classes. And they would, when they see the police stop someone, they would get out with the law book and start reading to the people that were being harassed their rights. And they would say, you have these rights, and you should know these rights. And the police obviously didn't like that, but it was legal. They stood a safe distance away. And at that time, it was also not illegal to carry a firearm openly. You couldn't conceal it, but you could carry it openly. So now you have these people carrying guns, and you have the police who obviously have guns. So it was not a kumbaya type moment for the police. There was tension, but they were legal and they didn't hurt anybody. So it went on like that. In 1967, April, there was a 22-year-old young man that was murdered in a city maybe 10 minutes outside of Oakland named Richmond by police. And that was the first rally that they actually had. And that started to kick up some steam about the Black Panther Party and people defending themselves and being able to carry guns openly. And this started the buzz. Later in the year, Huey and another comrade were stopped by two police persons. And of that stop, the police officer, or I call them people, targeted Huey. They attacked Huey. A fight breaks out, and the officer is, or a police person is murdered. The other police person is shot, and Huey is shot. There's actually a movie coming out that is on the short list for an Oscar, I'm told, and it's written by, there's a book called The American Justice System on Trial by Lisa Pearlman, who is a friend of ours, and she's an author. She's a retired judge. You can get more information about that when that movie comes out. They do screening right now, but you can look it up. And they credit that case and trial to the way attorneys attack jury selections here differently, because so now you have this incident, you have this activist who's shot and in jail. You have this police person that's dead and another police person that's wounded. And it was self-defense, if nothing else. So now you have a buzz around the United States about this case. Huey testified in this case on his own behalf. The community raised funds to get him proper representation as far as a lawyer. His attorney's name was Charles Gary, who was activist in his own right. And the outcome of that trial was, we say that he was found not guilty, but he actually wasn't. The jury found him guilty of involuntary manslaughter with time served. And the reason they came with that verdict was because they didn't want the police to riot or give the communities problems, and they felt like if they came down with a not guilty verdict, that it would cause uproar in the communities, and they wanted to keep the peace. So with the guilty of involuntary manslaughter verdict, it was saying he's guilty, but he does not have to do any more time. So he came out with time served on that case. And when the country saw this, Huey comes out of prison basically as a national rock star. The communities all over the country at that point wanted to join the Black Panther Party, and eventually J. Edgar Hoover, who was the head of the FBI, named the Black Panther Party the most dangerous organization in the United States. And when you even say that, that sounds so crazy, because public enemy number one here would be someone that would be a dictator of some sort or a mass murderer. But you have this organization that, what the Black Panther Party did was, obviously they policed the police. One thing Huey was known for saying is, if you have these police forces and you complain about an officer, who do you complain to? Well, it goes to the police department. And then from the police department, it might go to the district attorney, who's also located inside the police administration building. So you complaining about the police to the police, and that's just not enough. So you had that element, but you also had free breakfast programs, because the schools did not feed the children. They had inadequate education centers, so they would have after school programs teaching children basic skills, also homemaking skills. They also had medical centers located around the cities where they would help and aid people that needed help. They also had busing programs that would take people to and from jails to visit their loved ones. So you had a lot of these programs that were in place. And if you go into the Black Panther Party archive, you'll see one of the main talking points or foundational points of the organization was the 10-point program, which you hear about. And if you read that 10-point program, I'll go through it really quickly. This was the beginning of the party, October 15, 1966. Number one, we want freedom. We want power to determine the destiny of our Black community. We believe that Black people will not be free until we are able to determine our destiny. Number two, we want full employment for our people. We believe that the federal government is responsible and obligated to give every employment or a guaranteed income. We believe that the white American businessman will not give full employment. Then the means of production should be taken from the businessman and placed in the community, so that the people of the community can organize and employ all of its people and give a high standard of living. Number three, we want an end to the robbery by the capitalists of our Black community. We believe that this racist government has robbed us, and now we are demanding overdue debt of 40 acres and 2 mules. 40 acres and 2 mules were promised 100 years ago as restitution for slave labor and mass murder of Black people. We will accept the payment in currency, which will be distributed to many communities. The Germans are now aiding the Jews in Israel for the genocide of Jewish people. The Germans murdered 6 million Jews. The American racist has taken part in the slaughter of over 50 million Black people Therefore, we feel that this is a modest demand that we make. Number 4, we want decent housing fit for the shelter of human beings. We believe that if the white landlords will not give decent housing to our Black community, then the housing and the land should be made into cooperatives so that our community with government aid can build and make decent housing for its people. Number 5, we want education for our people that exposes the true nature of this decadent American society. We want education that teaches us our true history and our role in the present day society. We believe in an educational system that will give to our people a knowledge of self. If a man does not have knowledge of himself and his position in society and the world, then he has little chance to relate to anything else. Number 6, we want all Black men to be exempt from military service. We believe that the Black people should not be forced to fight in the military service to defend a racist government that does not protect us. We will not fight and kill other people of color in the world who like Black people are being victimized by the white racist government of America. We will protect ourselves from the force and violence of the racist police and the racist military by whatever means necessary. Number 7, we want an immediate end to police brutality and the murder of Black people. We believe we can end police brutality in our Black community by organizing Black self-defense groups that are dedicated to defending our Black community from racist police oppression and brutality. The Second Amendment of the Constitution of the United States gives a right to bear arms. We therefore believe that all Black people should arm themselves for self-defense. Number 8, we want freedom for all Black men held in federal, state, county, and city prisons and jails. We believe that all Black people should be released from the many jails and prisons because they have not received a fair and impartial trial. Number 9, we want all Black people, when brought to trial, to be tried in a court by a jury of their peer group or people from their Black communities, as defined by the Constitution of the United States. We believe that the court should follow the United States Constitution so that Black people will receive fair trials. The 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution gives a man a right to be tried by his peer group. A peer is a person from a similar economic, social, religious, geographical, environmental, historical, and racial background. To do this, the court will be forced to select a jury from the Black community from which the Black defendant came. We have been and we are being tried by all white juries that have no understanding of the average reasoning man of the Black community. Number 10, lastly, we want land, we want bread, we want housing, we want education, we want clothing, we want justice, and we want peace. So this is what the Black Panther Party is built on. And if you come full circle, these demands have never been met and they're still an issue. As recently as 2022, there's a Emmett Till anti-lynching law that was passed in 2022. Emmett Till, I believe, was murdered in 1955. And call it 100 years later, they have a law saying that it's illegal to lynch somebody and it's a federal crime. This is sickening. So I can go on in the party history, but let me go backward into where the longshoremen segue, because Harry Bridges, who was originally from Australia, and they called him a communist. I don't know exactly what year he came, but I do know that in 1934, there were 2 longshoremen here. Well, you call them dock workers. We call them longshoremen. The dock workers were murdered by the police in a protest about equal rights. And from there, so the dock workers union for the United States was all of the coast, so West Coast, South Coast, and East Coast. Harry Bridges separated the West Coast from the South Coast and the East Coast because he felt that they were corrupted and they did not assist the people of the community and the smaller unions. So in 1937, he created what we call the ILWU, International Longshoremen Warehousing Union, which people will refer to as a militant union, and it's based here in Oakland and San Francisco. If you go back that far in time, he did some amazing things, and one of those things was he said that any dock worker that would be hired, if you had two jobs, one would be white, one would be black. This is, I mean, this sounds, in today's world, it sounds quite reasonable, but at that time, that was, he was looked at as a demon by the oppressors. So with that knowledge, now you have the longshoremen that is located here in Oakland, San Francisco. And when they opened hiring, a lot of Black Panthers started to be employed with the longshoremen. So the longshoremen and the Black Panthers are very integrated, and they are both very socially conscious, and the dock worker, I would say, is part of the industrial world for work, and the Black Panther Party is straight up about civil rights, but they do coincide with each other. I can go deeper, but I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Yeah.
I can take that.
David, thank you so much. I think you've given us a real inspiration, and I'm sure there are plenty of questions and contributions from comrades. Who wants to kick off? Nobody's indicating so far.
Well, before we go further, there was another point that I should make. Now you're going back into yesterday's world. One thing that the Black Panther Party did also was there were a lot of women Panthers, and they were in the leadership role, and they ran some of the programs. And in Huey's many battles with the law enforcement, he was forced to exile the United States to Cuba at one point. And when he did that, he named Elaine Brown to be the head of the Black Panther Party on a national scale. So with that appointment, she became the first woman civil rights leader in history. She also ran for mayor. She didn't win, but that was monumental. And you have a lot of women that are still around that were in the leadership role and participants with the Black Panther Party. There's one sister named Erica Huggins who has a book that I believe came out about a year ago called Women of the Party. So you can get a lot of good research there. That also comes back to why J. Edgar Hoover said that the Black Panther Party was so dangerous to society.
David, we have now a number of comrades have indicated they have questions or contributions. So first Steve, then Jabu, then Ian.
Yeah, well, thanks, Comrade Nude, for your contribution. I think that the relationship of the ILWU and the Black Panthers is important. I was on strike at San Francisco State for open admissions for ethnic studies, and the ILWU was the foremost union to support that strike. In fact, I and other workers there who were on strike got jobs as longshore workers because of the ILWU. And one of the things about the ILWU is there was an anti-communist witch hunt, which I'm sure everyone is aware of, because it had a left revolution, a left communist socialist leadership. And the capitalists, the government tried to crush the ILWU, destroy it. They tried to deport Harry Bridges, the founder, 5 times. And they're afraid of the ILWU because it still has a democratic structure that allows the membership to have control. And that's how you were able and others to go to South Africa because of the democratic structure and control of your local. Because the international, a lot of people did not want the longshoremen in the West Coast, women and longshoremen, to go to South Africa. But I think the other question is about the Black Panther. They were for a united front, for working with working class, black, brown, white groups. And also they supported at that time the Peace and Freedom Party. And I think the question now is a unity of the working class, black, brown, white, Asian, to build a working class political alternative to the capitalist parties, because the rise of fascism in the United States and internationally has to be challenged politically. And the ILWU was active in the first, one of the first Labor Party formations in the 90s. They were for running labor candidates. And I think that today in the United States, there's a tremendous political vacuum. The Democrats, if you know about the recent attacks, blacks, murders of Nichols and others, it's continuing. I mean, the racist murders continue every day in the United States, the terrorism against blacks, and this is the same in other countries in Europe. So I think that the need for self-defense is important, and the need for a democratic workers movement and a political alternative is absolutely critical to defend the working class. Because one of the things about the ILWU is they don't just talk, they act. When a black member was threatened by the Ku Klux Klan in the North Bay, they actually organized a defense squad of members of the ILWU at that brother's home to protect him. And I think that's what unions should be doing. They should be organizing defense of their members, and they should be fighting racism. And one of the things about the ILWU and the Marine Cooks and Stewards, Jimmy Herman came out of that, the president, was they integrated the ships on the docks, which were segregated. They did that by stopping the ships. They wouldn't sail unless they were integrated. So that kind of direct action by workers against racism, I think, is what the Black Panthers, with the ILWU, and what revolutionary socialists in the unions need to be doing, organizing direct action against racism, against the racist attack and terrorism, and fighting for a working class political alternative. So we have many lessons to learn from both the Black Panthers and the ILWU.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's you're right on point, Comrade Steve. Like always, you firing on all cylinders. And one thing I would like to add, because sometimes it's misconstrued. You have some Black nationalist groups. The Black Panther Party is not a Black nationalist group. Panthers are all colors, white, green, Latino, you name it. They come in all shapes, sizes, and colors, as does the ILWU. I just want to add that to what you said. And the global networking, they were instrumental in that. Huey tried to embark on a deal with Mao for international trade, and Richard Nixon saw that meeting, and he went and met with Mao and opened the trade lines up between the United States as a whole and China.
Yeah.
All right, Comrade Jabu.
Yes.
David, sorry, before you do, can I just say, David, is it okay if we take 2 or 3 more contributions and questions and you reply to them together? Is that okay?
Of course.
Yeah, okay. Jabu.
Yes, thank you so much, David, for giving us that testimony of a very progressive movement, which I feel is still relevant today. And a lot of the issues that we are dealing with today, they don't seem to credit a lot of the work that's been done, especially around, say, breakfast school initiatives to the Black Panthers. Yesterday, I was at the cooperative conference in Oxford, and they were talking about various corps that are being set up around the UK. A lot of the principles, that guiding principles that the corps are kind of following are pretty much in the Black Panther original type of manifesto. But what I wanted to really understand from Newt was what is happening with the Black Panthers now in terms of the younger people, younger generation. Is there a lot of following in terms of the movement? I'm really interested in that, because when we in Durban, we talked about building international action around what was happening. What was the role of the Black Panthers during the Black Lives Matter? Was there visibility? Were people wearing, wearing their t-shirts? Were they calling out for action in terms of what the Black Panther would have sort of agitated around? Also, I mean, I'm really interested in knowing what sort of connections we can make internationally in terms of building our movement so that we can keep this momentum going, because I am very proud of what you're doing, because it's really important that you are keeping the family name going, because as you saw in Durban, there is such a big urgency from people to try and rewrite history and write people of history. It's so important that you're keeping your uncle's name and the Black Panther's name going. Thank you.
Yeah, very good. Ian.
Hi, thank you. It's a really inspiring talk, and I look forward to this meeting being up on YouTube, hopefully, and I'll try and share it in all my networks. And I just wanted to ask a couple of questions about US politics, particularly very local politics to you, because I never realized actually that about the bridge that you mentioned near the start, that Oakland and San Francisco are basically the same city, separated by a bridge. And in Istanbul, they call it one city, and half's in Europe, half's in Asia. But there's a few examples in Britain closer to home where they've got different names on different sides of a wee river rather than an ocean. So yeah, I didn't realize that. That does mean that you're right next to Kamala Harris's bailiwick, where until very, very recently, most of her working life, she spent in the same brutal system, more or less, as you described, as a very unprogressive prosecutor. I imagine someone like Huey Newton and the women Panther leaders you just mentioned would have had nothing but contempt for a politician like that. And it seems that a large part of the Black electorate in the last Democrat primary agreed, because apparently her already 1 or 2% that she was running at when she was running for president on her under her own steam, I think it was half of that proportion amongst Black people in particular. So much for her being a representative of the community as a whole in that identity politics way that she liked to take. So basically, how can we stop her? There's talk even of her not necessarily being the candidate if Biden goes, but it seems like the left and the Democrat Party have completely collapsed, especially on the war. I've heard that the Black left are generally better than the white left in the US on the war. I don't know if you agree or if you've got anything further to add to that. Certainly Black or white in the squad and the left in Congress, they've all uniformly collapsed on the war question, at least, but also been sucked into the Biden orbit more generally. On the other hand, again, very, very local to you, there's Councilwoman Gashama Sawant, who I see isn't standing for the council again because she wants to focus more on building a national movement to the left of the Democrats, and I wonder if you think there's anything there that might fly. And finally, just saw the flyer that Steve shared a minute ago on Mumia Abu-Jamal, talking of unprogressive prosecutors in the case of Kamala Harris. The DA, the Philadelphia DA, who it's mentioned was ordered by the courts to turn over files, seemed to be a much better one. Larry Krasner, a long time public defender, a really spiky relationship with the police, really spiky relationship with his own office when he was elected, in a way that as somebody who was a bit disappointed sometimes in how Jeremy Corbyn handled the permanent bureaucracy of the Labour Party when he was elected, trying to be too much of a unity monger with people who were intransigently against him. I thought, yeah, Larry's doing it right in that way, from what I could see. But it seems not so right on the Mumia case. So I wonder if there's anything further you could add to that. Has he been uniformly bad? If so, why? Given that the usual reasons, you wouldn't have to ask why, but with him, you'd have thought perhaps wouldn't have applied quite so much. So yeah, those are my questions that come to mind off the top of my head on American politics. But just say thanks again for a wonderful talk, comrade.
Okay, thank you, comrade. David indicated, are you ready to speak, David? David Hampson? I think he's having connection problems.
No, I have had
here you are. Okay.
problems,
Yep.
but here I am. Well, look, first of all, thank you, David. That was a marvelous introduction and description of all the struggles that were involved with the Black Panthers. And all of that came to life when you were speaking in Durban, and when you spelt out the idea that for the bourgeois, for the capitalists, they can pick up a phone and speak to each other and get help as they want from each other. But when the workers pick up the phone at this stage, you know, there's not someone at the other end of the line. And so we have to build an international network of struggle, not just only to discuss important as that be, but also to take action on a number of issues to bring us together in motion and in struggle, and to build a real living international, which can then become officially the Workers' International in every country and across all nations. You know, so that's quite an inspiring vision that you spelt out there, David. And I think that, you know, there was inspiring to those who are present and actually to us right now. You know, the resolution that we adopted, I won't go over all details, but it did spell out 3 key questions at this stage. First of all, on the coming Tuesday, that's the 14th, to take action. I know that Jabu's preparing to take action in Oxford. I know the ILWU is taking action. There'll be action, I think, in Boston and so forth. But we'll also be planning action here in Durban, where there's a consulate. And throughout the world, we hope, and there'll be something also in Japan and further beyond that. But we look to see if we can get resolutions in the unions in which we're in, the sections of the labor movement which we're in, to put enormous pressure on the US government and all levels of the prosecution and the whole legal system in America to re-examine, you know, what happened to Mumia, to look at those missing 200 boxes or so of evidence, and actually to get justice for him. It would, you know, it's an important issue which has been there for, I mean, more than 45 years, I think. But now we actually want to see it surfacing, and the ILWU is actually putting everything into this, and we want to stand with the ILWU in solidarity and with the union and with Mumia at this time. And then there's also the Rossing mine workers, which is coming up in March. These mine workers have been this is in Namibia, just near South Africa, were all dismissed when the union was unrecognized or by the Chinese state corporation, which took over a uranium mining in Rossing mine. And actually, we've seen since then the casualization of the workers and a situation in which the Namibian government has stood against the workers, as could be expected. And we are seeing horror after horror in terms of the situation of workers there and elsewhere in Southern Africa under such monopolies. And then the last one I'd like to deal with, the third issue I'd like to deal with, is the struggle against casualization of the docks internationally. So we've set out a vision to be able to build together the workers in key docks around the world to have union shops, in other words, to end the process of casualization of labor broking, which is rampant in the harbor and in the harbors of the world, and to meet globalization with globalization of action by workers themselves. Now we need to put a date on that and to be able to set out what we're doing. But certainly that's in there, as well as the release of trade union officials, such as those in Belarus, Gennady, who's appeared at our discussions at other times, and to secure his and other trade unionists who are in prison release. In other words, there's an action agenda that goes along with the ideas, is interweaving between the discussion of ideas, of history, and building an action program, which is going to bring together workers in struggle against the capitalist system in all its manifestations, and globalization, which is bringing the capital to the point of investment, particularly in former colonial parts of the world, under horrific conditions. So look, I want to say again, thank you, David, but then to make an appeal to all, please look at your calendars and see what we can be doing on the coming Tuesday. The information is out there in the chat, I think by Steve. Have a look at what's there and see if we can adopt resolutions and take actions in support of the international action of the time. And in this way, step by step, we're building an international which is based on action, on clear thinking, and direct mobilization with some of the most militant workers that we've got in America and around the world. Thanks, David, and thanks to all.
Right, thank you. I don't think anybody's indicating at the moment that they want to speak. I think maybe more comrades will want to come in later. So, David, if you'd like to make a couple of points. Before you do, I'd just like to ask a very quick question. What I find absolutely inspirational about the history of the Panthers, and it came through very clearly from David's contribution, is the way that they moved beyond purely sectional or communal or racial standpoint to a class standpoint, and to confront and challenge the entire capitalist system and the ruling class of America. And that, I think, is a lesson which is the most crucial one of the whole experience. And I noticed something, if you look at the history of Black struggle in the USA, we see that again and again, as the movement began to reach beyond a purely community level to a class challenge to the whole way that society is run, every time the state came in its most insidious and in its most murderous way in order to put a stop to it. For instance, Martin Luther King, who began, I think, really as simply as an evangelist, if you like, as in a religious sense, a kind of pious attempt to get equality, but he began more and more to see and to identify that the oppression of Black people was simply one manifestation, and the most ugly and brutal manifestation of class oppression. And as he was moving towards a socialist viewpoint, challenging, for instance, the Vietnam War and other manifestations of imperialist oppression, of course, they came in and he was assassinated. Then we saw with Malcolm X, we saw what began as really a rather primitive and naive adherence simply to Islam as a solution, but he moved very clearly and very expressively towards a class understanding of society and an appeal for class unity. And there again, lo and behold, he's gone down.
Yes.
Then we saw the development of the Panthers, a great step forward still, building on those experiences. As we've seen very clearly from that inspiring program that David read out, we saw how it challenged the whole basis of capitalism in America and imperialism. We saw again the incredible brutality and almost the war that was waged by the capitalist state against the Panthers in Oakland and in Chicago. In particular, I think the lesson of Fred Hampton is of great significance, who was putting forward a consciously socialist revolutionary position, uniting the class against capitalism, and he was guns down in bed by a completely murderous assault of the police. And of course, well, I think there's a lesson to be drawn there. It's a very clear inspiration to all workers around the world and to all socialists and everybody who's trying to change the system, that we really have to learn from the heroism of the Panthers in their heyday. So, David, over to you.
Comrade, yeah, you are 100% nail in head. You're 100% on it. I'll go through the questions, but just piggybacking off what you just spoke on, the federal government came after the Panthers, and with Dr. King and Malcolm X, both Malcolm X and Dr. King were assassinated, and it was later, it was always a known fact that the government had hands in it, but it was later a proven fact. Dr. King's murder of 1968 and Malcolm X's murder of 1965, there was a quote that was in some notes of the FBI of J. Edgar Hoover that said that he did not want to murder Dr. Huey P. Newton because he didn't want him to become a figure of martyrdom, as Dr. King was, and he felt Malcolm X was. So with that, he implemented what he called the COINTELPRO program, which would put moles and or assassins scattered throughout the party to systematically destroy the party, destroy the credibility of the party, destroy the programs of the party. And Fred Hampton Sr.'s murder was part of that, but he wasn't the actual head, so he got away with assassinating a true leader in Fred Hampton Sr. And you spoke to him being murdered on his bed. The interesting thing about that, Black Panthers did not have money. So they would have these shotgun shacks that they would rotate through and live. So they didn't have furniture in there, they didn't have anything in there. Fred Hampton's wife was pregnant at that time, and the membership of Chicago, they wanted her to have a mattress inside that hostel, if you will. And Fred Hampton did not want her to have a bed or a mattress because he felt that it was that she would be treated more royally than the rest of the membership. And he was against it, but they voted against his wishes, and he just so happened to be murdered on that bed while she was still pregnant. And Elaine Brown shared that bed with her when she went to Chicago, maybe a month before that murder. So yeah, you're right, 100% on point with that. Going back to the questions from start to finish, the Black Panther Party of today's world is non-existent. You have some socialist groups, smaller, that have tried to adopt a name and do some things, but there's no connection with the party of 1966 against self-defense and today's world. You have in the United States and I guess globally, the Black Lives Matter movement, and you have some other movements, but none of them are actually the child of the Black Panther Party directly. I would call them indirect children. To answer the question, I think, and you touched on it with the last points, we have to come back to the original founding of this party, which started to identify the economic classes. And when you come to say, okay, we are of this economic class and you conform, then I think that we can have a Black Panther Party of an evolved world, like what I believe you have here in this WIN, Workers International Network. I mean, the name is amazing in itself. And with that, we can police the world's police. But the Black Panther Party, to answer the question directly, we don't have that now. Going forward, I think it can be reformed in an evolved manner. The question about Kamala Harris is actually from my hometown. She's from Oakland. She was a student of the Black Panther Party schools for children that J. Edgar Hoover hated so much. We are not satisfied with the Democratic Party. I can't speak for everyone, but if you look at what you're talking about, you have your political groups, your Democratic Party or Republican Party, and you have your independent parties. The president of the United States job, he's the commander in chief, is to keep the infrastructure intact. Well, what does that mean? If you're keeping the infrastructure intact, then you're talking about a society that was built on the backs of slave labor, and the slaves were never reimbursed for anything. And you're supposed to keep that government body in place. So even if you're talking about a Barack Obama was not for the people that look like anyone on this chat, I believe. He's to protect the economic structure of the United States. So when you get into the politics of what they represent, it becomes very clear that we need a revolutionary change, if you will, because from the top down, we need to restructure this thing. And I think it starts with the working class people, because the working class people actually have their hands on things of value to people that are capitalists, and they need that. A comrade of mine always say power to the people, and he said, well, power to the working people. But I can't say power to the working people because I also represent people that can't get a job and don't have the opportunity to get a job for whatever reason. So I think we really need a refacing of this country, and globally maybe have some similar issues or the same issues with that. As they spoke to in the 10-point program, we are against the wars. The war is not what we are about. We are about the war of civil rights and human rights. And you start killing innocent people that have no economic gain in murder and genocide. We want no parts of that. The questions about Mumia's trial, the judge, 42 years later, I think you have to bring that into the fold. The judge, 42 years later, appears to be a fair and impartial judge, and as spoken to in the 10-point program, may be someone that grew up from his community. And he may have a chance at freedom in this capitalist society, where I even hesitantly say freedom because I don't know if I'm free, even though I can go to the store and buy what I want to buy. I don't know if I'm free in this society where I pay way more taxes than someone of a Donald Trump stature that makes billions of dollars off of I'm a black man, so I can say my black back, but my white brother's back and my Latin brother's back, we all of the same struggle. So we are not part of that world. I think if we are able to form some sort of coalition together on a global scale, the counter from the capitalist group will be what's already in place, and Steve Zeller goes into it with great detail, and I'd love to hear his stance on the political scene with Democrats and Republicans. But I think the counter will be the privatization of everything, and that will expand globally, and the automation of the industrial world. That will be the counter, and that's my fear. But if we can hold them off with unity, I think we can actually have true progress.
Right, thank you, Dave. We've got first Trish, and then Karel and Dave. So Trish, welcome.
Hello, hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, sure.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, David. That was incredibly enlightening. I found it so interesting and learned a lot from you. I was really pleased. I think more than a question, I wanted to make an observation about when you talked about women and the proactive idea within the Panthers of women being elevated to inequality, because I think this is a really important issue and a real problem within the class struggle. Because I don't know, sticking to the subject today, really importantly, about, for instance, the Black communities in America and in the UK and world over, maybe having to, maybe run to their communities away from police who are attacking them. Essentially, you can't trust the police, be them black or white, actually, but the white structure of the police. We saw this recently in America, didn't we? The police structure is racist, and I understand that was still a racist attack, despite it being five black guys. But essentially, what I found important, and what I always find important, is whilst the Black communities in the UK and America, in this instance, will run away from the police, back to their own communities for safety, the truth is the women might run back into working class, Black, Asian, whatever communities in working class struggle. The women will run away from the police, potentially to their own communities where they're also not safe. The reality, women are not safe in any of these struggles quite often. And it's really important that there's a proactive, a really constant proactive idea that there's a protection and an elevation of women's rights within all movements, really. The numbers in this country are staggering, really. It's 8, it was 7 for a while, it was 8, and then it went down to 7, and through COVID it's gone back up to 8 a month. Women in the UK are killed by partners, current or ex-partners, and that's just women killed by partners every month, and that's in the UK. I think that's lower than in America. I think America's higher figures. And this is across all classes and across all class struggles, and this is a concern, really. And I've found it very interesting in the Panthers that women were elevated to a very specific, important status, and I'm really glad you said that, because how important it is. And that's my observation, really, about what you said.
Thanks, Trish. Karel, and or Dave, or both? Dave. Hello, are you there?
Sorry, did you see that family argument about who's going first?
Okay.
So first of all, hi David, thank you so much. It was really inspiring to hear you speak. And yeah, so I've got a couple of questions, but I want to just tell you a little bit about what we're trying to do in Newham, because I think there were 5 of us here from Newham, which is a poor working class part of East London. And we've used what the Panthers have done, and we've been reading stuff and studying the literature around the Panthers for a few years now. So we're trying to emulate in microcosm what the Panthers did in America in our district. I don't know if you realise, David, the impacts that the Panthers had in the UK. It was phenomenal. It was huge, absolutely huge. And, you know, some people just thought it was the Black Panthers, but people like me, who's obviously not black, I'm very white, I'm very working class, I'm female, I'm quite old now, but when I was young, I read stuff. When I was, you know, in my early teens, I read about Huey Newton, I read about Fred Hampton, I read about George and Jonathan Jackson, and all the girls, because I went to a girls' school, the girls in my class, we shared those books, we shared that information, believe it or not. And this was in the early 70s. So you mentioned Elaine Brown, and she said one of the great things she said was our goal is not feeding breakfast, but creating the conditions for revolution. Oh, Dave's got a picture of her here. This is Elaine Brown.
Yeah.
A great woman, and that's what we're trying to do. So we're not giving out breakfasts yet, but we might well do. But we're doing survival programs, just like Fred did in Chicago, and we're providing housing advice to people, because housing's a big issue for working class people in this country. We run a uniform shop for families that can't afford to buy expensive uniforms for their kids. We source it, provide it for them, and we do a couple of food banks. And I know that some people think that, oh, well, you know, you're just sort of do-gooders, liberals. No, that isn't the case. We know that our people are suffering, so we have to stand shoulder to shoulder with them. It's solidarity, it is not charity. So I'd like to ask you 2 questions. If you could tell us a little bit more about how the women Panthers were empowered, because that's a particular interest to me. And I think also Trish is interested particularly in that. And you talked about, you know, we're talking about the conditions for revolution, and the fact that the Panthers is non-existent, as you said, today in America. What do you think is the possibility that the Panthers could re-emerge in the involved form that you talk about? What do we need to do internationally to keep the ideas? It's not the name of anybody, it's the ideas of socialism, of fighting the system by any means necessary. That is absolutely the bottom line. That's what we need to do, stand together. So I think it was Fred who said that you don't fight capitalism with black capitalism, you fight capitalism with socialism. So what do you think the possibilities are in America, in such a divided society, of being able to, the ideas of the Panthers to really take root and re-emerge as a force in society?
Well done, very good, thanks. Dave, do you want to speak?
Sure. Okay, thank you. Apologies for stepping in before Carol. I'm going to pay for it later on, to be sure. David, thank you for that. It was really inspiring to hear that. And in fact, the Black Panther Party are 50 years and more later still an inspiration to anyone who believes in fighting injustice and for a better society. And so what I've tried to do is, because I've read a little bit about them, is to try and boil it down to the essence. So I think what made them powerful is that they had the analysis of what was going wrong in society, a deep-seated analysis, and they took on board any strand of ideas that were progressive, so Marxist and other types of ideas. They would not shy away from that at all. And I think that's really important to say again now, that you have to have a deep-seated analysis that explains all the problems in society. And then they use that analysis to address the problems within their own community. So they were concerned about working class community survival and seeking their progress, not about electioneering. And Carel mentions about how we're trying to do that locally. And Roger and Carel were out locally in a deprived community on Friday, was it? Thursday. And they were knocking doors and saying, well, tell us what your issues are. And so we're sharing out the issues and trying to help them in whatever way we can, be that they need food, or as my background is housing. So there's a black family are going to be evicted by the council. So I'm supporting them on that because I've got that level of expertise. And so we think that's the way forward, is the deep-seated understanding of the faults of capitalism and the need for a different sort of society, but getting your hands dirty in the community and not worrying about electioneering most of the time, which is what the Labour Party does, which we were all members of previously. And I think another important thing you said was about how they didn't divide the working class by making it a black nationalist movement, but they actually tried to work with united fronts. And to me, an exemplar of that was the Rainbow Coalition in Chicago. I mean, if you go on YouTube and look up what the Black Panthers were doing there with these, I don't want to be use the wrong term, but hillbilly nationalists, if you like. It's incredible that you know, I'd run a mile if you thought to try and work with people like that, because you have this stereotype about what they're about, but yet the Black Panthers worked with them and Latino communities, and they brought together these people to fight the system. And I think that building a united front is really another lesson that you've talked about and that we need to put at the center of what we do. And the other thing I want to say is that we should really hammer home that the capitalists are not democratic, because again, the pamphlets shows that the state did everything they could to undermine the Panthers because of the threat that the potential threat that they had. They subverted them. They killed their members. You know, they used a divide and rule tactic, and the capitalists will use any tactic to stay in power, including fascism. And I think that's the real lesson for today, that with the absence in many areas of politics, the absence of socialism, what you're getting is a vacuum which can be filled by fascist ideas. And it's growing exponentially in this country, because let's not forget, in Britain, with the Brexiteers, the fascists, when they saw that UKIP was done for, the Brexiteer party, they left Brexit and they joined the Conservatives, and the Conservatives have got fascist elements within them, and some of their government spokespeople are now using this racism with the migrants, and recently their latest means of trying to revive their fortunes, they had tacked onto the end of an economic program, stop the boats, i.e. stop migrants coming over the channel. Now, how is that part of a program to get this country on its feet after Brexit, that you've got to stop migrants who are desperate and poor to coming into this country? Because it's a way of whipping up racism in people's minds against other communities, divide and rule. So the only thing Carell mentioned about reform of the reformation, if you like, of the Black Panther Party in the present day. So I also would like to know what your thoughts are about that, because that's what we're trying to do on a small scale. Thanks very much.
All right, thank you, Dave. Carol. I'm sorry, Carol. Carol Lang.
Hi, everyone. Hi, David. I had a couple of thoughts. I mean, one of the things about the fact that the Panthers elevated women in their organization really sort of harkens back to Black leadership of women in the United States historically. I mean, Ida B. Wells and all of the freedom fighters were, many of them were women, Black women in the United States. And so I think there was that recognition that women, Black women historically in the United States had been, you know, tremendous freedom fighters. But, you know, one of the things about the Panthers and other groups, like, I mean, the Panthers led to the Young Lords, to the Gray Panthers. There were a lot of different people who were inspired by the Panthers. But, you know, you have to remember that it was the sense of freedom after the 1950s with the McCarthy period and the oppression of everybody, and that there was, with Malcolm X and the Panthers, there was this liberation movement that just allowed people to finally breathe and get out there. And it was a tremendous change from the 1950s. But I think to try to resurrect the Panthers, which was in a particular period in the 1960s, is not a great idea, actually. I think that what we need, the thing about the Panthers and the thing about the American trade union movement is that it was incredibly racist, and it was white dominated, and really the Panthers essentially were out on their own because the trade union leadership was racist. It was, the AFL was intervening in struggles around the world and overthrowing governments. But now the working class in the United States, I think, is significantly different than in the 1950s. And so to have a movement apart from the regular trade unions that, you know, that are now beginning to fight their own leaderships in the United States, what we want to do is bring those millions of workers to the understanding that there's a need for a revolutionary struggle in the United States. And by and large, especially in places like New York and Chicago, the working class is Black. And so there will be a hearing for those kinds of ideas that really didn't exist in the 1960s or the early 60s, where, you know, unfortunately, while the Panthers were working class oriented, they weren't in the regular trade union movement. And so what we should want to do, I think, because now things have changed remarkably, is to engage those workers and try to pull them away from the leaderships that exist now that are totally opportunist and sellout and counter-revolutionary and all of that. But people are now ready, because, I mean, I think the Black Lives Movement is an indication that there's, especially among the youth and the white youth, the impact that had was astronomical. And what we need to do now is really break the trade union members from the leaders and really mobilize within, not to say that there can't be other organizations too, but these are already organizations of unions, of millions of members that are fighting against their own leadership because they've sold them out. And so I think rather than reproducing or replicating what happened in the 60s, we have to be a lot more creative now in the, you know, the 2000s. And you know, I think always, and especially in the United States, the Black working class is going to be the leadership of that change, but it needs to be one that establishes a connection with the trade unions now, and trying to make them, you know, revolutionary movements, as opposed to being separate from them and starting a revolutionary movement without them. Anyway, that's it.
Yeah, thank you, Carol. Is anybody else wants to make a contribution? David, perhaps you'd like to come back. There's plenty for you to reply to there.
Yeah, well, touche, Sister Carol. I think you brought home exactly what I was saying about the going forward and the evolution of what would be called today's Black Panther type or style movement. Call it whatever you want. Call it Pink Panther or people against the brutalization of the under economic class. Comrade, you moved me with the knowledge coming out of East London. That's in the photograph of my aunt. Well, Elaine Brown, I call her my aunt. She's my adopted aunt. That moved me. That sent chills through me, actually. Your question about the women, the role and the implementation of women in the party. My dad, he always would say, I can't speak to what I'm not actually a part of. Like if I was a Jewish person and somebody said something offensive to a Jewish person, which in actuality, by DNA, I would be considered a Black Jew. But if someone said something against the Jewish people and they felt insulted, who am I to say that they shouldn't feel insulted? Well, I turn that in with the perspective of the women in the party. I can't give a true assessment to the women's thought process in the party, but I can give you an evaluation of the participation. And in the Black Panther Party, there was a common goal, and it was not a hierarchy of the men have to be the leader versus the woman should be the leader. It was a human thing. And like Carol said, it was a time when we did have some things erupt and just inspire a massive change. I'll give you a quote from Elaine Brown. When Elaine Brown took over the Black Panther Party as the head in Huey's absence, you had a lot of rank and filers that were men, and they were not necessarily on board with a woman being figuratively the head of the party. And so in that meeting, she got on a table and she said, I have all of the money, I have all of the guns. If you don't want to be a part of this movement, leave now. And I bring that to your question about the women and the legacy of the party going forward. I think what we have here is we can stand on a table if we can collectively build something, and we can say, capitalist regime, we have all of your working class humans, we have all of your warehouses, we have all of your institutions, your educational institutions, we have our hands on everything. In that, you have all of the money and you have all of the weaponry that you would ever need. Join us and work with us, or don't, and we will have an economic class style war, which does not mean killing people, but it does mean some changes will happen as far as opportunities to be educated, as far as medical care, as far as working opportunities, wages, all of these things come into play. And to quote, because Carol brought up the historic woman leadership, Sojourner Truth, quote, "Am I not woman? Am I not human?" This is what we want to say to people that don't necessarily feel that they're on the same level of playing field. And to go backward in time, you're talking about an evolution of time. I believe probably Huey's favorite philosopher was Friedrich Nietzsche. And you go back that far, you're talking about pre-1900. And his philosophies are still, I mean, you can quote them just like you can quote a Proverbs or Psalms verses. And all throughout time, the wheels of time move slow, but we can influence those wheels with things like the Black Panther Party or Nietzsche or today's world.
Very good. Thank you so much, David. Right, Steve, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I think the lessons of Black Panthers, one of the lessons is the capitalist class in the United States and the trade union bureaucracy were terrified of the growth of the Black Panthers because it was a class, it was an organization that sought to unite the working class against the capitalists. So they were aware of it. And historically, the capitalists in the United States have been aware that the Black working class is the most conscious section of the American working class because of their oppression, because of their history of fighting slavery and the role that they played in our society. But I think we need to also look at the present situation because the trade union bureaucracy in the United States, for example, in San Francisco, they called a rally on the 16th, the same day that we're having the work action for Mumia at City Hall, and supposedly against racism. But the San Francisco Labor Council actually was in favor of giving more money to the police. So this trade union bureaucracy is pernicious because they say they're fighting racism on the one hand. On the other hand, they actually support police and police unions. This guy, Rudy Gonzalez, who's a former executive secretary, represents police and district attorneys. And he's the one that's been red baiting in the Labor Council and kicking people out. So they're calling a rally to say they fight racism at the same time that they're supporting more money for the police when people are homeless, people are on the streets, can't get health care. And that's something that we have to really take up politically, because you have a pro-capitalist, pro-imperialist trade union bureaucracy that support the war, for example, in Ukraine, and the 800 bases the United States has around the world. They don't want to fight U.S. imperialism because they support U.S. imperialism, the trade union bureaucracy. The same unions, the teachers, social workers, AFSCME, that are facing budget cuts are going along with supporting imperialist wars and candidates that take money from their members, take money from the working class, because that money that's going for the war machine is coming out of the hides of the working class. The other thing I think about the Panthers and the movement in the 60s was there was a movement for a mass mobilization of the working class, for a general strike against capitalism. And as Comrade Newton knows, the power of the capitalists fear the ILWU because it uses its power at work of shutting down things. And when it comes to money, the capitalists make profit from the work of labor. And they were terrified of the working class. And the ILWU was built in a general strike in San Francisco in 1934. that shut the city down and organized hundreds of thousands of workers. So this lesson of the mobilization of the working class and general strikes against war, general strikes against racists, the racist terror, that's the kind of action that will really transform the political situation. And again, that's a fight against the trade union bureaucracy who are hostile to general strikes. They don't even want to talk about general strikes. In fact, the Vermont AFL-CIO was saying there should be a general strike against the attempted coup and insurrection, and that would have been a fascist coup. They would have attacked Black communities if they had been successful, if Trump had been successful. And Trumpka, the head of the AFL-CIO, tried to shut them down, try to put them in trusteeship. He said, we can't talk about a general strike because Trump will use that as a pretext to impose martial law. Well, they don't want a general strike because they don't want the collective power of the working class in this country. They don't want a united fight of Black, brown, Black, Asians, the entire working class politically against the capitalist class. And I think that's where we have to go, because that is the only solution to really stop this racist terror, to stop these imperialist wars and the economic destruction of the working class that we're facing in many, many communities.
Thank you, Steve. We've got one hand up still. Trish, if you want to come back. I'd like to also say, the discussion is really drawing to a close, but if anybody would like to say a last word, you're very welcome before David closes the meeting. And I'd like to particularly welcome, I'm glad to see here, Mark Wadsworth, who's somebody who's been viciously victimized by the Labour Party bureaucracy, and he's very welcome to the meeting. Trish.
Hang on, I'm just unmuting. Fantastic. I just wanted to confirm, really, I'm in Newham, and yeah, Carell has set up a kind of culture, really helped us understand, certainly me, helped a culture around what the Panther and Pantherism around community. And I've really learned a lot from Carell and others in Newham to understand that. I do want to say, though, around sort of, for instance, the Black Lives movement and the Black Lives Matters movement, as we always say here in the UK, I'm not sure if it's BLM always in the States, but the truth is, what I've noticed here, whether it's been infiltrated by the right, whether it's controlled through media, and how we hear from the communities, is the word socialism is always pushed away from their narrative here. The Black Lives Matter kind of speeches I've heard, the talks I've gone to, they will consciously say, this isn't about politics. This isn't about being left or right wing, which made me and continues to make me really furious, because it's all about politics and it's all about the whole thing. And I've had a few like conscious kind of talks with people where I've had to really say, look, it is politics. It is what you're, and they've said, no, we're not political. And it's been kind of framed, certainly in the media in this country. I don't know if you've got that same issue in the States, David, but in this country, it's been framed as Black Lives Matter is not about politics. And it really has taken the stuffing, I think, out of the movement in a large way. It's been a really clever way of dampening it in some ways, which is terrifying, really. I just wanted to make that point, but thank you. You've all been fantastic.
Okay, thanks, Trish. If there's nobody else who wants to speak, David, one last word from you.
Well, I am prepared to say a word or two.
Oh, yeah, hi, Mark. Yes, do come in.
Yeah, so the name is Mark Wadsworth, and it's an absolute joy and a privilege to be on the same platform as the nephew of one of my great heroes, Huey P. Newton. I went to an all-white school and had to educate myself in Black politics through a subversive intervention in a book club, believe it or not, where I was ordering books like Soul and Ice, the Soledad Brothers, If They Come in the Morning, Angela Davis. I think that the teacher in charge of the book club thought they were novels and non-fiction, and I was able to fool them. I was very lucky to be alive during the tumultuous struggles in the 60s and into the 70s. But, you know, my heavens, what went on? It wasn't just in America, it was here in Britain, where they had such a thing. Joe Hart wrote about it in a pamphlet, nigger hunting. You know, the black notices in windows, no blacks, no dogs, no Irish. My father fought in the Second World War to keep this country free from the Nazis. Only when he was out of uniform and came back to this country to rebuild it after the devastation of the Second World War, facing rampant racism, along with other ex-servicemen and women. And we still have a battle to fight, as we know. We saw what happened on Friday at a refugee hostel near Liverpool in Knowsley, where hundreds of fascists, thugs, whipped up into a frenzy by the racist rhetoric of this conservative government that scapegoats migrants, asylum seekers, and refugees. Do you imagine? Just 2 weeks after Holocaust Memorial Day, these fascists were on the streets. So we have a very irresponsible government that uses the race card, that uses xenophobia to shore up its support and take attention away from the cost of living crisis and the way they've crashed this economy and attacked the poor, refusing to give wage increases to health workers who kept us alive during the COVID pandemic, firefighters, teachers, even barristers, lawyers, going on strike in an unprecedented way. And I want to sound the note of optimism amid all of that crisis. And that is that our young people are on the move through organizations like Black Lives Matter. Comrade David, they were mobilizing day after day in a way that it would sometimes take us months to organize a march or a protest or a demonstration, using social media, TikTok, Instagram, fantastic organization. And the climate activists in Just Stop Oil, Extinction Rebellion, Occupy, the women fighting not just sexism, but police brutality. Think of Sarah Everard, who was murdered by a serving police officer, raped and murdered. The system is rotten, but we are a part of an international fight back. The strikes that are going on in Britain, Brother David, are unprecedented. And so I think that there is a resistance movement, that we shouldn't just concentrate on opposition, so-called opposition parties like the Democratic Party in America, the Labour Party in Britain. The struggle is outside of Capitol Hill and in Britain, Westminster and Parliament. And I think that that way we can build through organizations like my new The Liberation Movement, which I put in the chat. Have a look at our statement on the attacks on the migrants. We can join the dots together. The great thing about the Panthers was that it wasn't just about race, it was about socialism. And they used to go around, remember with Mao Zedong's Red Book, they were very clear that this was a battle of the global South and the global majority against the white supremacy, colonialism and imperialism of the global North, the global minority. And I think that, frankly, the imperialists are quaking in their boots because they know that when Russia gets together in a Eurasian alliance with China and the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, and China, soon to be joined by other countries like Argentina. Don't forget, there's been a surge of socialism in South America, Chile, Colombia, Peru, Argentina, Brazil. We still have Cuba. You know, we have China, which is along with India, the two of the most populous countries in the world. The struggle is not over. It is continuing, and I believe that in our lifetime we are going to win. But we have to be united across oceans, across continents, as diasporas, as people of color. We can and will succeed. A luta continua, a mandla.
And where to?
Is related. The land belongs to us.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. That's brings the discussion to a really inspirational end. Thank you so much. David, do you want to have a last word?
Well, man, all I can say that is power to the people. And yeah, thank you for putting the forum together. And again, just to reiterate, I think what you have built here could even be a starting point for a true global network in the Workers International Network. I mean, what better name could you have? And if one of Dr. King was giving a speech in the end of his life, I believe he may have passed within that week, he said he wanted to attack the economic floor. And to just, Huey, he don't care about money. The working class, we working to survive. So they care about the money, attack what they care about, and maybe we can have some common ground of understanding. And I think that what you have here, comrade, and comrade David Hems, you guys, Jabu, man, this what you have here is special. And if we can really expand this network of need and share each other's local issues instantly, like the Black Lives Matter made protests, you said daily, which it would take months. Instantly, we will know. I'll know what's going on in Liverpool. I'll know what's going on in Durban. I'll know what's going on in Oakland, and then we can collectively make a change.
Right, David, thank you so much. I'd like to just close the meeting by saying that you're all more than welcome to come every week. We meet every week. Workers International Network is exactly what we are. Mark, you spoke about the struggles worldwide. We had, last week, we had a comrade from Brazil. Next week, we have a comrade from Peru reporting on the struggles in those countries. We've had, just in the last few weeks, we've had comrades from South Africa, comrades from Belarus, victimized comrades who are actually martyrs to the class struggle there. We are trying to build a real international network. We have comrades here from a number of countries who are participating today. So look, please, Mark, come back. David, come back. We'll make sure that you're on the mailing list, and please bring as many comrades as you can. This has been.
We have contact details for David.
Yes, sure.
David, is it okay if I get your contact details?
It would be an honor. I think we have to go forward. It's an honor meeting you and hearing you speak, and I would appreciate that, and I need yours as well.
Thank you so much.
Mark, perhaps you could just send me in the chat your email address. I'm not sure I have it, so we can put you on the mailing list. And,
yes. Carol has all my contacts.
Okay, that's great. Okay.
Detail. Yeah.
So next week we have a comrade from Peru. There's one little hitch. The comrade will be speaking in Spanish, and we're still looking for a translator. If you know anybody, we do have certain options. If you know anybody who might be willing to volunteer their services, can you please let me know? But we will find somebody. Do come, and I'm sure that's going to be another brilliant meeting. thank you, David, for your contribution, which has been an absolute inspiration, as I said. Bye, comrades.
Thank you. Turn to
Bye.
take me to the chat first to see if anybody responded to me. So